Please introduce yourselves. Great way to network and get to see who's in the room joining us today. So good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're calling in from today. I know we have people from all over, which is very, very exciting. We will get started in about 30 seconds, but thank you for all of those who are joining us today. Again, use the chat box. We love to see who's on the call with us. And we're very excited to have Judy today. So before we jump into Judy, just welcome everyone from Allraise and thank you for joining us for part 2 of a 3-part enterprise SaaS series. As you guys know, today's session will be about developing your go-to-market strategy. I am Marianne Arake and I lead digital events here at Allraise. And as many of you may know, we are a nonprofit dedicated to amplifying female voices, accelerating female success, and creating a tech culture where women are leading, shaping, and funding the future. And our events are made possible with the support of our volunteers and our great sponsors. So thank you so much to our partners and our volunteers who do make all these events available for us all. Before we jump in, there's 2 housekeeping things that I want to share with you all. Again, this is a webinar, so there are 2 functions. There's a chat function, so please introduce yourself to others on the call in the chat box. There's also a Q&A box, which is what Judy and I will be paying attention to as the session goes on. So drop your questions in there. And for many of you, we will have this session recorded and we will have it posted on the website for you all to access about 24 hours after we end today. And the basic overview of the agenda today is I'm going to intro Judy and then we'll jump into Judy's session. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Judy. Judy is an enterprise SaaS executive investor and advisor. She has been building and investing in SaaS companies since 2000 when she was recruited to Salesforce.com as one of the original product managers. This includes 7 early years at Salesforce.com, 7 years consulting exclusively with B2B SaaS companies, 4 years building a VC firm that invests in early stage SaaS companies. As a consultant, Judy has helped over 30 plus SaaS companies develop their go-to-market strategies and was acting CMO for companies including Zora, ServiceMax, and Conga. As an investor, Judy led proactive investment strategies and advised portfolio companies as a board member and observer. With Bela Ventures, Judy is selecting, advising, and investing in a new portfolio of successful early stage SaaS companies. So thank you so much, Judy, for being with us today. I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it over to you.
Excellent. It's great to be here. And thank you again for everything you and the Allraise team are doing and to all of your sponsors who let you do it at an even bigger scale. So thank you, everyone. Anyway, I'm looking forward to being here. And this is a presentation I actually developed quite a few years ago and first presented at Zora's Subscribed conference. I think it was 2015, but it stands the test of time and it still just has, my intention is to give you a very structured and usable framework that you can use to help either your company or your portfolio companies develop a really strong go-to-market message. So as Marianne mentioned, I've worked with a lot of B2B SaaS companies over the years. So let's skip that. Here's what we'll be jumping into. One thing I'll clarify as you guys take a look at the agenda here is that everything in this presentation and this approach was specifically developed and designed for B2B SaaS companies. So it doesn't mean that there aren't kernels that if you're an investor or a founder of a non-B2B SaaS company or a non-enterprise technology company, it doesn't mean there aren't some things you can't also think about and take away from it. But I just want to be, really upfront with who it was designed for. And honestly, I wasn't thinking of anybody else, any other type of business when I created it. So if you see gaps for some of those other markets, they are very real. But for those of you who are investing or operating or leading B2B SaaS companies, hopefully you find this helpful. So to start off, the big question is why does this even matter? And there are countless companies who, especially in the early days, but even through their mid-years, can hobble along without strong messaging and feel like I'll deal with that later. I'll deal with that after I raise my Series A. I'll figure out my better messaging after Series B, after Series C, you know, and it's, so people often ask, like, when is the most important time to do this? And I say, like, now, immediately, yesterday. There's never really a benefit to putting it off. And the reasons are that it's really strong positioning accelerates every part of your business. People think of it as only something used that marketing needs, you know, for talking, for your positioning on your website and to prospects, and for, you know, marketing and sales to go out and talk outbound. And so it is very important for awareness, but really strong messaging can also help shorten your sales cycle. Because if you come up with really strong messaging, that one is super clear for your prospects, they get it faster. And if you can create a sense of urgency for them, it bumps up on their priority list to engage with you during your sales cycle. But strong positioning can also really help your companies recruit top talent, because it creates a shared vision for all of your employees who are all out there saying the same thing, and creates a compelling vision that that future employees want to join. And then this last item is something I wish I would have known when I was a product manager. So I came into tech from the product management side. I've now moved and done marketing and partnerships and other things. But when I was a product manager, I didn't realize how helpful it would have been to just, instead of trying to convince everybody of why these recommendations and these features and these were the next things we should build within our product and our platform, instead of trying to convince everybody in a bottoms up way, you can actually, by throwing out a strong positioning message, take almost a top-down convincing approach. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could tell this message? Boom. Isn't this what we all want to be and what we want to say? Yes. In that case, here's what we need to build. So it's a way to both help you prioritize your product planning and your roadmap, and also convince people internally on ideas that you want to go get built. So really, messaging is important across almost every aspect of your company. Now, for all those companies that I mentioned that hobble along with their messaging and don't really tackle this, what they end up doing by default, because they haven't actually developed positioning, is they just start talking about their product. And I know everyone on this call, no matter where you are in the world, if you've ever spoken with a founder or somebody who works for a technology company, you've experienced this. Oh, what company are you with? Oh, what do you guys do? Oh, and they just start talking about the details of their technology or their product. And everyone just sits there sort of politely, as long as they can, bored out of our skull, because we don't give a shit about anybody else's product. We fundamentally don't. Products aren't interesting until there's a context that makes them relevant for the person you're talking to, and you connect the dots for them to tie it to what is interesting to them. So products aren't interesting, technology is not interesting, and you could have the best technology in the world, but if you don't find a way and create the language to talk about it, you're either boring people or, you know, just really slowing down your sales discussions. Oops, sorry. The second reality check is, even on early stage teams where there might only be 5 people at the whole company, or 10 people at the whole company, 20, 100, it's everyone thinks they're aligned, because really, if you think about the go-to-market teams, there's the CEO, any co-founders involved, head of product, head of marketing, head of sales. And depending on the size of the company, maybe that's just the first salesperson, the first marketing person, and the first engineer and the co-founders. However, whatever size company we're talking about here, you absolutely all agree on most stuff. And you probably even all agree on 95% of things. But it's in that last 5% where, if every single person, each of your go-to-market functions are even 5% not aligned, then you're actually not all, what's the expression, rowing the oars in the same direction. You're not all working as efficiently and towards the same goals as you could be. And that really can be a waste of time and money. And really, time is what is the most expensive for startups, and you can't afford to not be aligned. So some examples are, I've worked with companies and they're sat in their executive meetings and their board meetings, and everybody sounds like they're saying the same things. When you push on it, sales product says, we're building products for this mid-market, okay? And the CEO and the board say, yes, we're going after this mid-market. And then sales is like, yes, we're selling to the mid-market, but we also are trying to get a few of these bigger deals. And so look at these deal sizes. Aren't they great? Let's also go after those. And let's also go after here. And so there can create this distortion in where the energy and the time and the resources are really being spent. So while messaging doesn't keep everybody aligned, going through a messaging and positioning exercise, that process that incorporates all of your go-to-market teams and executives, can be a very great process to go through to get everybody aligned, at least for a point in time. So another piece of advice I often hear that I don't agree with is people telling a founder or another company, like, you should be more like so-and-so, whether it's you should be more like Slack circa 2015, you should be more like, insert name of the day, cool company of the moment. Getting told that you should be more like somebody or have your messaging be more like so-and-so's can be very misguided and lead you down a wasteful cycle as well. So what's really important is that you really need to focus on coming up with messaging that is appropriate for your market, your products, and your prospects. And while you can get inspiration from some other places, taking a copycat approach for messaging and go-to-market positioning just never really works. So high level, we're going to dive into, we're actually going to go into a very detailed framework, but to give some context for that framework first, these are the 5 things that have to be thought about holistically as you're developing your positioning. So first is your audience. And for this, I don't mean every possible audience in the world, your important audiences, prospects and your customers, period. How do they break down? A lot of people, especially in marketing, like to think about things in personas. That's not what I mean here. So I don't care about personas within a company. I'm talking about with everybody you're selling to, how do they break down by segments and what are the inherent differences between segments? So it might be, if you think of audience segments, prospect and customer segments, it might be small, medium, large. Maybe it is that simple. Maybe it is by type of industry. Maybe there really is such a big difference, by the type of industry. But usually those are not the most compelling or relevant differences between your audience segments. It's often something more nuanced and specific to your solution, such as maybe their level of sophistication. Are they novices in what your solution helps them with, or are they already really savvy? Are they analytically driven? Are they creatively driven? Are they, I don't know, we're going to go through it, but thinking about your audiences and thinking about the segments is really, really important. The next thing to think about are your partners, either partners you already have or partners you want to have. And just, we don't over-index here and we should never over-orient here, but it's important to, we exist within an ecosystem. Whatever company you're with, you exist within an ecosystem of other options and other solutions that surround and, are used side by side with your solution. So it's really important just to think about, who are the partners that you could complement or extend and just sort of have clarity on their messaging. Next is pricing and packaging, and really thinking about how do you, based on your target audience segments, how do you right size your pricing and packaging for your audience segments and in a way that emphasizes your strengths. So pricing and packaging, how you are going, is the ultimate manifestation of how you're going to market and how customers can buy your products. So you can't have positioning of, we're the cheapest, lowest cost, which, by the way, never recommend that for positioning if your pricing isn't actually cost effective or low. And you can't have positioning that tees up pricing and packaging options you don't offer. So it all has to come together. And then finally, your product roadmap is incredibly important because hopefully you're working for companies that are constantly investing in building, strengthening the capabilities of your solutions. And so doing company positioning only for exactly what you have today with blinders on about what you could be adding in the future or what you know is coming in the future, just guarantees that your positioning is going to be out of date as soon as the next release comes out. So it's very important to develop positioning based on what you offer today and what you know is coming in at least the next 12 months. I like to actually think about it more like 24 months out. Let me just stop and see if there are any questions yet. Okay, here's a good question. The question is, how evergreen should your messaging be, and how often do you recommend doing a messaging refresh? It's an excellent question. So your core messaging really should be evergreen and stand the test of time. That doesn't mean it doesn't get strengthened and that it can't evolve. So especially as you think in your, so let's talk. So first, evergreen versus moment in time. Core company positioning is not moment in time campaigns. So for instance, 2020 and all of its suckery. There might be some opportunistic campaign messages around, oh, you're working from home, or oh, you're, the remote workforce. And there are lots of moment in time campaign messages that companies have appropriately used because of what's going on in 2020. But it would be wrong to create your entire core messaging around a moment in time thing, like lockdowns and pandemics, unless you're developing pandemic response solutions and that is your core offering, in which case absolutely double down on that message. So messaging should be evergreen. Now, the other aspect of this is it might be phased. So you might think about, well, today we offer this much in our solution, but we know we in the next 12 months, we're adding this much more, and 2 years later, we're adding this much more. When we have all of this, our messaging will evolve and be, so it's, as you're doing messaging, it's almost like you're thinking through it on what you will have in the future and working backwards with what you have now. So what you develop now can naturally and logically grow and evolve and strengthen with what you add. You should not come up with messaging today that completely breaks by what comes in the future and that makes it sound like you've done some massive pivot. So as much as possible, really strong company positioning should be more evergreen. So here is a high level overview of the structure. We'll go into a lot more details. I think of, I didn't name it the 3-room structure. Sometimes I actually think it's more like 4 rooms, but whatever, 3 rooms, this 3-room structure. The reason the word rooms works for an analogy here is that in order to fight the urge to start answering the question with what your technology does, what your product is, rooms are a good physical example of a way to say, like, I'm not allowed to talk about that until I walk them to room 3. I have to first talk about these other things in rooms 1 and 2. So it is truly a guided messaging structure meant to make us feel like, oh, must do these things in this one room. And it's ultimately to help your target audience and your prospects get the best experience, which is getting the most understanding and clarity about what your solution does. So room 1 is where you create the context. Some people call it's the why now. It may be where you talk about what's going on in the market and what's going on in your prospect's world that makes you relevant. But in developing your context in room 1, you're also priming them for what you want them to be thinking about before you introduce your product, right? So we all have lots of things on our mind at any one time. And I take a new call with somebody and they start telling me about their product. I might actually really need it. But if what I'm thinking about right now in terms of my top priorities are over here, I might also have a top priority that they could help me with, but I'm not primed to think about that or focus on that yet. So identifying your context is also your chance to prime your listeners on the problems you want them thinking about. You walk through room 1, you get to room 2. That's where you get to introduce like the value that they could be getting. You know, it's like it's ultimately the value that a solution like yours can provide, but it's not even necessarily about you. It's just the value they could get from a solution like yours, and how you could, like, the impact they could make. And it's not that you make, it's the impact they could make using your product. So ultimately, this is the biggest North Star. And it's funny, now that I'm about to say this, I don't have this on any of these slides, but the North Star for great messaging, the North Star for everything for a successful B2B SaaS company is customer success. So ultimately, it's how the undercurrent of everything, not even undercurrent, the foundation for everything is, how does your solution help your customer and that company be more successful? So after you're done talking about things in room 2, which, like I said, I have a lot more details we'll go through, then in room 3, you finally get to introduce your product. But it's really just an introduction with a high-level structure that reinforces your value, but it's not the end-all be-all answer. And the main thing to take away is that positioning is not meant to make anybody an expert at your company or your product. Positioning is just meant to help them go, oh, I see why that's important. And if and when I need that, I know who to go to. And that's the most, you know, and convey your value. Just double check question. So I clicked on chat by mistake. I'm gonna click on the question.
No questions.
Oh, sorry, guys. I saw it popping up. I thought it was.
No worries.
Okay. So let's jump in. Okay, let me just, one other quick thing here. If you think about this, you know, 3-room structure, this curated path that you're taking people down. Think of if you go, last time you went to IKEA, probably in 2019, they don't let you just choose what room you want to go to. They force you on a curated path through all the rooms. Same thing when you go to museums. It's pretty hard to just get to the one thing you want to get to. They take you through, you know, a curated experience path. So that's what positioning is doing, is you're getting to define the story path that you share before just launching into your products. Okay, room 1. This is where we start getting specific. Okay, so room 1, it's entirely for your broad audience of prospects, and some, you know, there's not a one size fits all. It's not always the same, like, you must talk about this. But, you know, it's always good to just, so before you can even start room 1, you have to have crystal clear down who your target audience segments are. And that's gonna be one of the homework things from this. But then you can take a step back and just ask yourself some of these questions. Like, is there something big happening in their market? Is there some big pressure or transformation happening? And when there's some big shift happening in their market, that's wonderful. And that may likely end up becoming part of your story. But oftentimes you're selling to a market where there just simply isn't a big shift happening, right? There's not always some tidal wave of positive or negative tidal wave affecting your prospect. So that's one question to ask. Another thing to ask yourself is, like, is your solution and the value you're going to provide, is there a way to attack their status quo, right? And now that I'm looking, so I'm not even loving the word attack right now, so we're going to talk about that for a minute. But can you position yourself, like, is there a status quo issue with their established way of doing things, their established model? I really want to cross off the word attack right now, because one important thing for messaging, and this is my own belief, a lot of people, I've seen other people talk about positioning, and they'll often say, like, oh, you need to shock and awe them with how crappy they're doing everything today. And that shock and awe approach to, like, wow them with how much better you can help them by pointing out how crappy they are today is not an approach I recommend. I don't like it. It doesn't say it. If starting off with a negative angle like that in your positioning is just going to put your prospects on the defensive. And that's never helped a sales cycle when your prospects now are defensive and denying everything and inclined to just not like you because you're being a jerk. So I instead like to take an approach of honoring the status quo and the established model, and, like, yeah, that's what you've had to work with today so far. That's how things have maybe always been, or how you've had to do it. And oh my God, you have done an amazing job with what you've had to work with so far. And gosh, but it doesn't have to be like that. So there's a way to still have this. You can attack a status quo in a model without attacking your prospects. So it's really this, like, are there new things in their market, in their industry? You know, what are those relevant things affecting them? And what is happening that's creating more urgency and making now the time that they should act? Because this context, if you think about it, is also teeing up why they should even listen to the rest of what you're about to say, why they should give you the full hour for your sales demo call instead of cutting you off after 20 minutes. It's really like why they should even prioritize listening to the rest of your story. So we have to tie it into one of their top 3 priorities. Okay, once you've created a context and primed them on what you want them oriented on and thinking about, then you can take their hand and walk them into room 2, which is, this is very much for prospects. And this is where you articulate your value. Now, but once again, there's a difference between articulating your value and talking about yourself. So we can articulate value without talking about ourselves, because as soon as we jump to talking about my belly button and my product and my features, it's just less relevant. But if we are talking about their biggest use case and talking about understanding it and framing what sort of impact they would like to make. And ultimately, if you work, no matter what company you work for, if you have a chance to work on something that is going to make a meaningful impact on a board level top 3 priority, which is, let's face it, usually one is always growth. One is usually around innovation. Like, that's a cool thing to be working on. And those sorts of strategic initiatives are most likely to get funded, both in the resources and the elbow grease that are needed to make them successful. So while you're articulating your value, that's not the same as talking about yourself, right? So it's still talking about, it's really helping understand, like, what is the impact your customers want to make? Do you see one question? Okay, here's a good question. So the question is, if you are in a noisy market or often compete against other competitors in the sales cycle, how forward should you be in addressing differentiators and value against competitors head on? And should this info be readily available on a website? Okay, great question, Caroline. So yeah, your prospects and your customers today, they have options, and you're not the only one knocking on their door or emailing them. So what I don't recommend is ever introducing your competitors by name or by logo or by anything identifiable. Instead, but I do like bringing through their alternative options early in the narrative. And you'll see that when we get to the last slides here, but I'll just talk about it a little bit here. And it's, so while you're not pre-combating specific competitors, you are pre-framing their other options. You could, and remember, sticking with the status quo is usually the top competitor. It's making a change is hard for companies. So while you might have a lot of competitors, the status quo is usually competitor number 1. And so framing the options like, well, you could try one of these other solutions that, might be sufficient in these smaller ways, or you could hire someone to do everything for you in an outsourced model, or you could stick with the status quo and deal with this next year, and then you get to poke holes in those alternative categories of options, not competitors. One other reason not to mention competitors by name up front is maybe you are the first person that's talking with them. I know about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I was talking with like a long time ago, former CMO of DocuSign. And he's like, oh yeah, one of our best lead sources came from a competitor who had a side-by-side comparison of us on their website and in their deck. And basically this side-by-side comparison pointed all of this other company's prospects to DocuSign, and they didn't know about DocuSign this long ago. Was it 10 years ago? Anyway, it was literally when DocuSign was just starting, and this other company was further ahead, and their website, because it had a us versus DocuSign page, was literally the top source of leads for DocuSign at that time. So you never have to do that type of promotion for your competitors. Here's one more question. If you are a more consultative company that offers custom solutions that has multiple use cases, do you feel it is bad to articulate multiple values or use cases? So no, well, let me back up. You're a consultative company and you have the options you could probably answer yes to anything. And so while you can help with multiple use cases and multiple things, you need to identify the common thread. So your product, your strategic messaging challenge is to say, what's the common thread across them that make people think of you, and and frames why they should choose you because you're particularly best at things with that thread. I'll try to come back to this in one of the follow-up slides. Okay, one more question here and then we go on. So this other question is, how do you articulate value in a nascent market that is also full of hype? My company, yeah, so I wasn't surprised, AI category. AI is nascent, completely full of hype. In most cases, AI, the words machine learning, AI, blah, 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 have been co-opted and used by people who just know how to run reports. So similar answer. AI is nascent, but it's real. You need to be able to articulate and frame the nuance or the characteristic or the specific thing of your AI, and what it's for, beyond it just being AI for X industry, AI for this use case. There's something that in the discussion, in like the questions for yourself, which are going to be on some further slides, there will be ultimately something about your UI and how you approach it and what it gives to your customers that is unique and can differentiate you from, say, a C3 AI that does everything. So AI is a hard new category, but that is different than going after a brand new category, right? I know a company right now who's actually doing something that is going to, she has to actually define a whole new category of software. So in some ways, AI is not a category of software that needs to be defined, but your solution, your AI solution has to be defined. So category creation messaging is a whole additional layer of challenge on top of this. Okay, let me move into room 3 real quick. And I'll look at the questions again in a minute. My biggest takeaway here, I want to hit on one more thing. The top 3 priority is really, really important here. So what I'm about to say is Judy's opinion. I have no data to back it up, and yeah, I think it's true. So if you think about, we all have top 3 priorities. We have our list of 10 priorities, and we have our list of 20 things we need to get done. But our top 3 priorities don't change very much. Our top 10 we eventually get to, and those last 15 on the top 20 list, like honestly, we just don't get to them because it's impossible to get to everything. So if you are selling a product that can hook into and truly help tie into your buyers, one of their top 3 priorities, it's top of mind. They're more likely to respond to your email, take your call, have the meeting when they say they're going to have the meeting, listen closely and lean in and pay attention because this is something they need to sell for. If you are selling something that meets their priorities numbers 4 through 7 or 8, well then, oh yeah, I got to get to that. Okay, I'll take that meeting. But when push comes to shove and that meeting gets close, if they need to free up an hour on their calendar, your meeting is going to get pushed to the following week. And then maybe the week after that. And when they're listening in the meeting, they're going to be listening, but maybe also checking an email because something else is really important. So basically, if you're selling a top 3 priority, if you can hook your messaging into somebody's top 3 priority, it can help shorten your sales cycle because people are leaning in and they have to solve this. And it's more likely to get the budget, and it's more likely to get the resources assigned to implement it, roll it out, focus on user adoption, whatever it is, to help make your SaaS product successfully implemented for the long term, and therefore you'll have lower churn. Where it's in priorities 4 through 7 or 8, slower sales cycles, they can get budget for the software, but they're not going to get the teams as much focused on implementing it and making it long-term successful. So you might be at risk of higher churn. And after priorities 7 through 8, sounds like you might have a great technology that's searching for a market and a buyer. And this is really not, messaging can do a lot to help, but fundamentally, if your product or solution doesn't meet the top priority need for who you are building it for and who you're selling it to, it's a much harder climb to build a business. Okay, room 3. So room 3 is where you do get to introduce your product. Now I'm not even liking the word explain here on the left. Introduce your product. And what's most important here is thinking of the structure of how you explain it. So we're all humans. If I start telling you my product does this and 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 this, and I just rattled off 9 things. Most of you probably stopped listening after the 3rd thing. And all of you definitely stopped after the 5th or 6th thing, because human brains aren't meant to hear and. We need the period at the end of the sentence to process what was just said and digest it. So describing everything you provide, especially as you've grown incrementally in an and way, is too much for prospects. Like, human brains don't process information that way. So what I call the 52 card pickup is, you might have, your product might start off as it does these initial things, and it's gradually, so maybe you have 52 different things your product and your technology can do today. It's this like 52 card pickup of reshuffling and saying, how do I put these 52 things into maybe just 3 pillars? Maybe it's 4, at most 5, but how do we position all of these things, regroup them so that they're really, really strong? And based on the story we're telling, we can just say, oh, our product includes A, B, and C. And everyone hears that and goes, well, of course, those are the logical A, B's, and C. So it's not just that they're grouped randomly into 3 columns. It's that the A plus B plus C are just like the, of course, magic solution. So it's the structure of how you talk about your product is the most important thing here. Because remember, we're not trying to make everybody experts at everything. You will have later conversations for that. And nobody is ever going to be an expert at your product until they're a super user. So this is where we get to pick what are the top things we want to talk about. And picking the names for those pillars is a way to convey the value of what you provide. Similarly, this structure in this product marketing process of thinking about what's the best way to talk about everything we've built, you end up with a structured way to talk about your solution that, when it's done really well, sorry about that, I tried to shut down Slack, actually can help you bring that structure into product demos and possibly even into your product. One of my portfolio companies today has this product that has more than 52 capabilities. They've been building this product for 5 years. It's so strong, but each time they've had to add something new, they've been in a hurry. So they've just added it and just added it and just added it. And there's actually a chance within their product to literally improve their in-app navigation to better surface everything they've built. And just in some ways, it's in their case, because they've added things so incrementally, a chance to just reorganize where things are accessed from, makes for a much stronger demo and makes for a much better initial customer experience because the customer can better understand like, oh, that's where that is. That's where that is. Oh, I get it. And so it can be a stronger product experience as well. Okay, so I'm going to go into a quick example. And I think I mentioned I developed this presentation back in 2015 for Zora's Subscribed conference, which is why I used the Zora messaging example, because I figured the whole audience would be familiar with it. For those of you who aren't familiar with Zora, they were started about 10 years ago and went public a year or two ago. They are a subscription business platform that helps companies manage the full back-end operations and front end for managing your subscription business. I did not do a good job on that messaging there. Anyway, so, but in 2007 and 2008, when they were starting, back in 2007, 2008, I don't know how many of you guys were doing product or marketing or anything then, but everyone was just coming out and saying, we are the fill in the blank, we are the Salesforce of fill in the blank. So Zora, to quickly describe what they were and who they were, they said, we're the Salesforce of online billing. And every SaaS company at the time was saying, we're the Salesforce of X, we're the Salesforce of Y, we're the Salesforce of Z. And I understand, and so there's something that was effective there. In 2007, 2008, it was a way of quickly communicating that our product is delivered online and there's a recurring revenue aspect to it, some sort of monthly or annual subscription. By saying you're the Salesforce of something back then, it did convey quickly those two things. But for instance, today, 2020, everything is cloud and mobile and SaaS first. So it's not necessary to differentiate, to start off that way. So this is a quick way of summarizing what you are, but doesn't provide any context, doesn't explain why it's important, and doesn't create any urgency. It's like, great, it's a short description. It's more of a bucket holder. Like, great, you're in that bucket. So an effective way to be in that bucket. I feel like this is outside of B2B SaaS, but everyone's like, for all the marketplace solutions, or like the Uber of such and such. Well, that was a great way to say, great, you're a marketplace with these two sides for something. But let's use that, just consider that placeholder, not strong messaging. Now, using the 3-room structure for Zora's messaging, the context for Zora is that the world's moving from people and businesses wanting to buy things to wanting to subscribe. Businesses are doing that with software. Individuals are doing that with all forms of entertainment. I mean, car subscriptions, everything, right? So today in 2020, talking about subscription economy, everyone's probably like, yeah, no shit. In 2007 and 2008, it wasn't universally accepted. And we were having to pull out lots of examples like, look, Blockbuster versus Netflix, Siebel versus Salesforce. So we were having to pull out lots of examples, but to introduce this concept of the markets, consumers and business buyers are moving and preferring to buy in a subscription-based way. So we called that, team came up with the name of the subscription economy. And that became the tagline, powering the subscription economy. But then you need the whole story behind it to support that. You can't just, a tagline and a one sentence isn't enough. Everyone always focuses on elevator pitches, which are really important. But sometimes when people say, and then what? When like your elevator pitch is good, you need to have the rest of your story to tell and more pieces. So in this 3-room messaging structure, room 1 introduces the subscription economy and gets them nodding along like, yeah, I do like Netflix better than Blockbuster now, or yes, there is a potential for AI that is able to do more than what my teams can do. So there's some sort of context and priming them on what we want them thinking about in room 1. Then in room 2, the value is, how do you help subscription businesses grow? How do you, what are the things that are needed to help operate and grow and scale a subscription business, and getting them thinking about those details and what it would take to have your subscription business not hindered by systems, but actually accelerated by them. And then as people are nodding along going, yeah, we do feel those pains. And yeah, I do. Yeah, that would be helpful. Then it's, oh, by the way, that's what we do. Zora's subscription business platform helps companies launch, manage, and grow your subscription businesses with these solutions. You know, and like at the time when they started, we had three pillars. We added a fourth, reshuffled. So now they've really grown out their solution. So it's a lot bigger. So you can see how just saying like, this is not a conversation starter. This is a what answer. We're the Salesforce online billing. Oh, okay. I might desperately need it, but you haven't drawn, this messaging doesn't draw those connections for me. So I don't understand why it's relevant for me. While this is, oh yeah, I do have a solution that either is a subscription solution or I'm a really big old school enterprise. And yeah, I do see subscriptions eating the world and I do want to figure out my subscription strategy. Oh yeah, okay, then what's needed? Okay, great. Oh, now I'm nodding along and we'll lean in a bit as you're describing what you offer. So that's the difference in leading with your belly button versus leading with positioning. See a couple of questions. Just want to pull them up really fast. Okay, now starting at the top. Okay. Okay, so one quick question that has to do with how do you know the client priority ranking? Go back a couple slides here. Really, this comes from getting to know your prospects and your audience. So it's really important that you really do deeply understand them. So you're building a product for somebody, you're building a product for a business. It's important to have conversations with your prospects. And, you know, if you walk in there saying, I'm an early stage company, we're building a product for X, then they're oriented on your X, right? And they might only talk to you about that X, and they might list their top 3 priorities, but they're angled over here. You've already anchored them around you. And so a lot of the information you get is flawed because they're so anchored. I have a friend who's an exec at PayPal, and I wanted to have her talk with one of my portfolio CEOs. And I said, I'd love for you to just have a conversation with her. And she said, great, what does she do? I said, doesn't matter. I don't even want to tell you what their product does because it fundamentally doesn't matter at this stage. What matters is her learning about your role, your function, and your top 3 priorities. And so literally introduce them for a conversation saying, you're not allowed to know what this other company actually does, because I wanted to get her authentic top 3 priorities. So that's just one thing to think about. Is like, it's one way to think about, like, you want to know who you're building for and selling to, and then be able to have conversations with them, not anchored around yourself. Let's see what the next question is. And a quick time check. Okay. For a SaaS tool, to what extent do you recommend including as a pillar or module the customer onboarding and other ways in which you're providing overall value to the customers to solve their problems as part of the overall package? So I think the question, it's really within the product structure, how much should you include your services as part of that? And the answer is sometimes. If you have a whole bunch of tech and it's too much, you don't have to. You can always think this product technology structure is meant to describe everything you've built. If you've built 100,000 lines of code or 100 million lines of code, right? Like, it's all doing something. And what is it that's everything you've built and provide? Services are always something that can be, and we also provide services to help you get set up and running, or, services can be an also outside of your product stack. Unless I do know some companies where their services, especially when it comes to like AI products and that initial setup of the AI is so core and embedded and must be done. And there's so much nuance and specialty there that that is something that they've incorporated within their offering stack. So the answer is, it depends, which I know can be annoying. Sorry. Let's go through a few more slides and then I'll stick around for questions at the end. So now we're into the exercises portion, and I have a couple of slides here. This is how I think everyone should approach their target audience matrix. Put this into Excel, and it's really just these 4 columns. What is the segment? What is that segment's top goal? What do they have to do? What's their biggest blocker in achieving that goal? And so these first 3 columns are not about you at all. They're not about you, your product, your company. You don't exist in these first 3 columns. And then once you have clarity on these first 3 columns, well, why would that segment choose you? To bring it to life, I mean, I recommend put some swear words in here, because it's either, like what is the thing that they need to do? And it's either, God, if I could just unlock X, right? It would be amazing. And then this is like, they're ready to pull their hair out and they're so mad, but I can't because it's so fucking hard, right? Like it's gotta be, there's something just blocking them and stopping them. And it's like, this is only an internal document. So like, it's gotta be, you gotta keep it real for you and your teams. Now, as far as how many segments you have, I'm only showing it with 1. You might have 2 authentic segments. You might have 5. I once had a company was like insisted, no, we have 11 different segments. And I was like, seems a little high, but okay, let's play it out. We went through this process for all 11 segments. And what we found in that example was in many of the cases, when we did all 11 segments, there would be like 2 or 3 of the segments that had an identical use case, an identical blocking challenge, and an identical reason to choose. They were really the same segment. They were really the same everything. But if there's a difference between what's their top priority, what's their top problem and blocker, and what's the top reason they would buy you, then they probably are authentically different segments. I have some resources at the end of this presentation that will help guide you through this process. Some written stuff, but so I'll keep going here. The next is similar. I call this the product structure matrix. Let me change this. I think I said put this in Excel. Don't, put it in a Word table. All of these should be done in boring Word tables or Google Doc tables, because messaging should be clear. All of this work should be clear and organized and systematic. It should not be pretty. Don't make it pretty, because prettiness can distract from whether or not you have the right bones in the structure. So for your product structure matrix, same thing, boring Word table or Google Doc table. And basically this is where you're figuring out like, well, what if we broke out everything we do into these 4 modules? Well, what would they be called and what would be included in each one? Okay, well, if that's how they were broken out and included, what would be the leadership message for this? This module helps you do this. And and ideally somebody's buying your full superset of your solution, but it is possible because when you do pricing and packaging, you might carve out different parts for different target audiences and different segments. So you can also, it's really like what's the top value and reason that somebody will want this module. So think about it in terms of 3 to 5 modules, and there's a lot more in the chapter that goes with this. So once you've have clarity on your target audience segments and the differences between them, remember, it's not personas, it's really characteristics of the business. And you have your product stack, how the new structured way you're going to talk about your product, then it's time to bring it all together into your company narrative. So room 1 is, you start with what's happening in their market, what's affecting them. I'm not saying the things I have in here this entry part doesn't have to answer all of these. It's more pick the something. Pick that anchor opening conversation thing that is priming your audience for what they should be thinking about and what you want them thinking about. So just because I have 3 bullets here doesn't mean you have to include all of those up front. That would be too much. So first, and this, by the way, is a Word doc, simple bulleted outline format. It can be the longest outline in the world, 5th or 6th grade style outline. Second part, you frame the current situation. Gosh, yeah, this is all going on, and oh yeah, this is hard. But remember, not in a way that's honoring how hard it is today, not putting them down for failing so much at it today. So, God, this is really hard. You have to deal with all this shit now, and your options, God, they're not very good. Your options are A, B, and C, and yeah, lots of challenges, and that's, those are pitfall prone. But God, yeah, those are the options. Then this is number 3 is where I sort of think of it as like, you're getting to define this ideal utopian solution. It's, if anybody's plays t-ball, it's you get to define the ball that then we're going to hit out of the park. So we're not talking about ourselves, but we are defining, God, all these options are down here are so hard and yeah, just insufficient. God, wouldn't it be great if you had a solution that just magically did this, this, and that, and gave you everything you needed? It's a way of basically you're teeing up your product structure without talking about yourself. And then at the end, it's, now we're into room 3. We finally get to introduce yourself. Well, that's exactly why we built our company, to help companies struggling with the stuff you were struggling with up in room 1, help them achieve their utopian solution, with our product. And then because in number 3, you've teed up a hypothetical solution like yours, you don't have to spend as much time talking about yourself. You just say, and our product includes, excuse me, A, B, and C. So it's a way of talking about a whole bunch of things where they're much more likely to be listening and nodding along before you introduce yourself, which is way better than when you're talking to somebody who's like checking their watch, bored. That would happen if you just started talking about yourself. So this is the narrative that you need to create in front before you talk about yourself. I know we are very close to the end, so I want to share these resources with you. As I mentioned, this isn't the first time I've given the presentation. So over the years, there are supplemental materials. There's a blog post on it that summarizes a lot of what I've said on the Zora site. I contributed a chapter about this topic to the SaaS Startups Founders Guide published by Salesforce quite a few years ago. It's hard to find on the current site, so there's the URL that I think should still get you there. And then for anybody, this is actually a book I strongly recommend, Beyond Product. Jill Soley is the author. She's a longtime head of product, Chief Product Officer, VP of Product for SaaS companies. And she wrote it to help product-focused teams, and especially product founders, understand marketing. So I recommend the whole book. If you don't want to read the whole book, there's a Medium post that she did breaking out like the full interview for that part. So these are all supplemental things that basically repeat everything repeat and provide more of everything we've covered today. Let's go. Let me see if there are any questions. Okay, here's a question. Well, real quick, Marion, is it okay if we're pretty much done. I don't have anything else to cover.
Yeah.
I'm happy to stay and go over questions.
Yeah, we can do the 3 questions if people want to stay on the line to listen.
Okay, awesome. So here's a question. What if you are in a market where you believe a subscription model is valid, but your competitors are purely commission-based? How do you articulate to your customers that subscription is truly a better value when the common reply is, but X, Y, and Z don't charge subscriptions? So this is a model. What's great is if I do believe that in many cases, subscriptions are a superior business model. There are some cases where usage-based business models are better. And you have to think about the business model, like what is the business and pricing model? How does it align to customer value? And so if these other companies that are purely commission-based are, it's hard to know without having a concrete example in my mind. I don't know. It's hard to answer without a specific example in my mind because the answer is different based on the context. But what there is an opportunity when you can develop messaging that is, if your company's premise is that this solution in a subscription model is superior over the status quo commission model, then that has to be your lead. You have to take your subscription-based approach as the top lead message for your story, and you get to attack the commission-based model. Early days, Salesforce did this with attacking the enterprise software model as being bloated, expensive, millions of dollars, years to implement, value never realized. And isn't it better just to get an easy monthly subscription, blah, blah, blah. So if all of your competitors in the market is used to a different model, pricing model, that is a great thing to get to attack head on and just own it, embrace it, and address it really, really early. Another question. How do you set up pricing for enterprise? It's a really good question and a really huge one, and I can't even start to do it justice right now. I think pricing for enterprise needs it's a whole topic in itself. Trying to think of any immediate resources. I'm drawing a blank. I've captured your name. I'll try to think about that one to send you a resource. What is the best way to create positioning for a B2B to C with common goals but different needs? I'm just going to bow out and say that one. I don't know. I'm not a B2B to C expert, but I'm sure there are B2B to C experts. And so definitely ask them. How do you articulate value to instill that aha moment with a prospect when your product service is essentially creating a new model or category? So yeah, creating the new category is really hard. And creating a new category. So basically in the example where I said we reframe their current options, you have to show how all the, it's one option is to embrace all the other entire categories. So it's like, this category of solution doesn't work. This whole category doesn't work. This whole category doesn't work if there are multiple, or if you're only going against an existing known category that doesn't work, that's why you have to create this whole new category. Then that is a good angle for like your storyline for the whole narrative. Here's another, and the last question here is another pricing question, which is around pricing. How do you price a pilot to show your proof of concept to get in the door versus SaaS pricing that is necessary for long-term? There needs to be a whole pricing session. Quick answer there is just protect your long-term value optionality there. So if you do anything for an initial proof of concept, make sure you have clear boundaries around it, clear boundaries around what functionality they're getting, how long they're getting it for, and really frame up front that this is proof of concept experience and timing, and even introduce what the pricing will be early, because why even do a proof of concept with the customer if they don't know what the pricing will be in the future? You're just going to spend a lot of resources and time on that proof of concept, and they may then throw up when they hear your pricing at the end of it, and you've just basically done the most expensive sales cycle ever. So yeah, I think we are out of time.
Yes, thank you so much, Judy. Really appreciate your time and answering all these great questions from the audience. Audience members, I will make sure to get those links to send them out and post them on our website along with the recording, which you will find tomorrow on our All Raise website. Make sure to check that out. And there is a feedback survey. So please make sure to give us your feedback so we can see how else we can better support you. Thank you again, Judy, for your time. Super appreciate it. And awesome. Everyone who was on the call.
Awesome. Wish I could beat everybody, but hope everyone has a good rest of the year.
Yes, likewise, likewise. Thank you, Judy.
Thanks.